It was supposed to be a simple job. After months of searching, I finally found work as a bus driver for the local school district. My friends had joked about my new position, calling it the most uneventful job in the world, but I didn't care. The pay was decent, the hours were flexible, and I'd finally have something to fill my days. The morning of my first shift was crisp and clear. I arrived early at the bus depot, excited but slightly anxious. The old buses, lined up like weary soldiers, loomed before me, their bright yellow paint glowing in the sunlight. I took a deep breath, stepping inside the main office. A woman with frizzy hair and thick glasses greeted me. "Welcome, you must be the new driver," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Mrs. Hastings, the dispatcher. We'll get you set up in no time." She led me through a quick orientation, explaining the routes, the schedules, and the basic protocols. But one thing caught my attention during the tour. In a small, dusty room filled with old uniforms and forgotten trinkets, she opened a heavy wooden drawer and pulled out a yellowing piece of paper. "Ah, here it is, the list of rules," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a secret. "Every driver has to read this. Some of these rules might seem peculiar, but just stick to them and you'll be fine." The rules were handwritten, scrawled in an urgent, almost frantic style. I scanned the page quickly, intrigued. Here are a few that stood out. Always arrive early. Never pick up hitchhikers. Don't let the last child off alone. If you hear someone whispering your name, ignore it. Never look in the back seat after dark. Most drivers ignore the last few, Mrs. Hastings added, chuckling nervously, but you never know. "Never know what?" I asked, half joking, half curious. "Oh, you know, the stories." She waved her hand dismissively. "Just keep the kids safe, and you'll be alright." As I prepared to drive the bus for the first time, the weight of the list pressed on my mind. Sure, some of the rules seemed ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they held a deeper meaning. The first day went surprisingly well. I picked up the kids from their homes and dropped them off at school, their laughter filling the bus with an infectious energy. I felt a sense of pride as I navigated the streets, honking the horn cheerfully and greeting parents. However, by the time the afternoon shift rolled around, I noticed something strange. The school let out at 3 p.m., but one little boy named Tommy, with messy hair and a bright red backpack, was always the last one to get on the bus. The first few days, I thought nothing of it, but by the end of the week, I began to feel a sense of unease. On Friday, as I waited for him outside the school, I noticed the sun dipping below the horizon, casting eerie shadows on the ground. It felt different. The air was charged, crackling with an unsettling energy. "Hey, Tommy, ready to go?" I called, scanning the empty parking lot. He usually appeared quickly, but this time, there was silence. Suddenly, a voice broke through the stillness. "Mr. Bus Driver, up here." I turned to see Tommy standing on the edge of the playground, waving enthusiastically. I chuckled, relieved. But as I pulled away from the curb and glanced in the rearview mirror, I noticed something odd. The playground was empty. The other children had already gone home. "Did you just leave your friends?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Tommy shrugged. "They were playing tag. I just wanted to stay a little longer." I nodded, but a chill crept down my spine. The whispers from the rules echoed in my mind. Never let the last child off alone. As we drove down the dimly lit streets, I glanced in the back seat. Tommy sat there, his eyes wide and bright, looking out the window. But something was off. He seemed a little too quiet. "Hey, Tommy, you okay back there?" I asked. He turned to me, his expression serious. I heard the whispering again. "Whispering?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his small voice barely audible. "The voices, they call my name. They want me to play with them." My heart raced. I remembered Mrs. Hastings' warning. "What do they say?" He hesitated before answering. "They say they'll take me to the fun place. They say it's better than here." I chuckled nervously, trying to deflect his fear. "Well, let's just focus on getting home, okay?" Tommy nodded, but I could see the worry etched on his face as we continued down the winding roads. That weekend, I couldn't shake Tommy's words from my mind. I decided to do some research, hoping to find a logical explanation for the whispers. I spent hours online, scrolling through forums and local news articles, looking for anything unusual about the area. As I scrolled, I stumbled upon an article dated back to the 1980s. It detailed the tragic story of a young boy who had gone missing while playing near the school. They found his backpack on the playground, but he was never seen again. The authorities conducted extensive searches, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. The article ended with a chilling statement. Many have claimed to hear his whispers in the night, calling for friends to join him. My heart sank. Was this the same boy Tommy was talking about? I had to be careful. The last thing I wanted was to stir up trouble. Monday arrived, and I found myself nervously scanning the schoolyard for any signs of Tommy. When he climbed onto the bus, I greeted him with a warm smile. "How was your weekend?" "Okay," he replied, avoiding my gaze, but I heard them again. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, recalling the rules. Ignore the whispers. But how could I? A child was involved. As we drove, I caught a glimpse of Tommy looking intently out the window, his little face drawn and pale. The atmosphere in the bus felt thick with tension. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, trying to sound supportive. Tommy shook his head. "They just want me to come play. I told them I couldn't because of you." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" "I told them I had to stay with you. They don't like that." His voice was barely a whisper. Suddenly, the bus jolted as something hit the side hard. I swerved, almost losing control. My heart raced as I looked out the window, half expecting to see a deer or some other animal. But there was nothing, just the empty road, stretching endlessly ahead. "Are you alright?" I asked, glancing back at Tommy. He nodded, but looked even more frightened. "They're trying to get me." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I remembered the rules. Never pick up hitchhikers. I hadn't seen anyone, but the unsettling feeling of being watched loomed over me. When we finally reached Tommy's stop, he looked hesitant. "You'll come back for me tomorrow, right?" "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. But as he got off, I felt an odd sense of dread. Something about that day had changed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers were getting closer. The following days became a blur of anxiety. I kept expecting something dreadful to happen, and Tommy's increasing withdrawal worried me. He would arrive at the bus with dark circles under his eyes, barely speaking a word, lost in thoughts I couldn't fathom. One afternoon, as we drove through the dim streets, I noticed a flickering light in the distance. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. My mind was racing with thoughts of the whispers and the stories I had read. As we approached a deserted park, the lights danced, casting eerie shapes on the ground. "Tommy, did you see that?" I asked, my voice tinged with unease. He nodded slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "It's them. They want me to come play." Before I could respond, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the park, just beyond the flickering lights. A child, alone, waving at us. My heart sank. "Don't look," Tommy shouted suddenly, his voice filled with panic. "Keep driving." I turned back to the road, but my heart raced as I fought the urge to glance in the rearview mirror. The child waved again, and I felt an inexplicable pull, a desire to stop and help. "Why can't we stop?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because they'll get you too," Tommy screamed. That snapped me out of my trance. I pressed the accelerator, driving faster than I ever had before. The park receded behind us, but I could feel the tension in the air. The whispers were louder now, a cacophony of voices calling for me, beckoning me to turn back. When we finally arrived at Tommy's stop, I turned to him. "You didn't tell me about the whispers before. What do they want?" He looked at me with fear in his eyes. "They want me to come play, but I can't. I promised you." "Good. Just remember that, okay?" I said, trying to mask my own terror. "You stay with me. We'll get through this." But the unease didn't leave. The whispers haunted me, filling my dreams with chilling cries. I spent restless nights tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched, hunted even. The week dragged on. Each day felt longer than the last. Tommy had become a shell of his former self, the bright child I once knew reduced to a whispering shadow. One evening, after dropping off the last child, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Hastings. "Can you come to the depot? I need to talk to you about something." My heart sank. It was late and the depot was empty, illuminated only by the flickering fluorescent lights. As I pulled in, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The place felt deserted, almost haunting. Mrs. Hastings waited for me in her office, looking grave. "I heard about your experiences with Tommy," she began, her tone serious. "You need to understand something important." "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "There are legends about the old playground. Many drivers have experienced similar things, especially with that boy." She leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "They say he was taken by the whispers and now he lures others." Lures? But why? I couldn't wrap my head around it. The playground was built on land where a tragedy occurred. Children go missing and their spirits linger. They seek companionship in others, dragging them into their realm. My blood ran cold. "So Tommy, he's in danger. You need to protect him. Stay vigilant." I nodded, fear gnawing at my insides. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping back. The whispers echoed in my mind, becoming more distinct with each passing moment. The next day, I noticed Tommy acting even more withdrawn. When I asked him about it, he barely responded. It was as if he were fighting an internal battle, trapped in a world of shadows and whispers. That afternoon, we drove past the park again. I braced myself, but this time I saw it. An eerie mist swirling around the swings, shapes moving within the fog. "Tommy, look." I pointed, but he was already shaking his head, tears glistening in his eyes. "They're angry. They want me to join them." "Hold on, Tommy. We're going to get through this," I shouted, my heart racing. The bus was filled with a heavy silence as I drove past the park, the whispers growing louder in my ears. It felt as if they were swirling around us, grasping at our souls, urging us to join their unseen game. The following day, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling ominously above. As I drove to the school, rain poured down, obscuring my view. The atmosphere felt thick with tension, as if the air was charged with the promise of something terrible. When I picked up Tommy, he looked pale and frail, his eyes sunken. "They're getting stronger," he whispered, clenching his backpack tightly. "Stay close to me," I instructed firmly, though I felt the creeping sense of dread returning. "I won't let anything happen to you." As we navigated the winding roads, the whispers began again. I fought to ignore them, but they grew louder, drowning out the sound of the rain beating against the bus. "Tommy, can you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, fear evident in his expression. "They want me to go to the playground. They say it's time." "No, we're not going there," I shouted, my grip tightening on the wheel. But my resolve weakened as I felt an overwhelming force pulling me toward the park. The bus swerved as I fought to maintain control, but the whispers escalated, drowning out my thoughts. Suddenly, I spotted a figure in the distance, standing at the park's entrance. It was the same child I had seen before, beckoning us closer. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding in my chest. "Tommy, stay back," I yelled, but it was too late. The doors of the bus swung open as if on their own accord, and Tommy stood frozen, staring at the child in the fog. "Tommy, don't," I shouted, but he stepped out, moving toward the figure. The whispers filled my mind, urging me to follow. I jumped out of the bus, adrenaline surging, but as I reached for him, the mist enveloped us. The world around us blurred. I felt a cold hand grasp mine, pulling me into the shadows. I turned to see Tommy, his eyes wide with terror as the child vanished into the fog. "Tommy," I screamed, but the darkness swallowed my words. The whispers grew deafening, wrapping around me like a vice, urging me to join them. I fought against the pull, desperately reaching for Tommy. "We need to go. Come back." But the darkness thickened, and I felt myself slipping away. I had to resist, had to break free. Gathering every ounce of strength, I pulled Tommy back, and we stumbled together, breaking through the mist. Suddenly, we were back in the bus, the storm raging outside, rain hammering against the windows. The whispers faded to a dull roar, and I realized I had somehow driven away from the park. I looked over at Tommy, who was trembling in his seat. "Are you okay?" I asked, fear etched across my face. He nodded, but the fear in his eyes told me otherwise. I almost went with them, he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. We're safe now, I assured him, though doubt gnawed at my insides. We just need to get you home. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure in the park. But there was nothing, just a darkening sky and the rain pouring down like tears from the heavens. When we reached Tommy's stop, I turned to him. You need to tell your parents about this, okay? You can't keep it to yourself. I can't, he cried. They won't believe me. They don't understand. But I do. We need to tell someone. This isn't over. He nodded reluctantly, and I watched as he walked away, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread settle over me. The rules haunted me, whispering warnings in my mind. Never look in the back seat after dark. That night, I tried to shake the events from my mind, but sleep eluded me. The whispers echoed, growing louder with each passing hour. I felt the weight of something sinister pressing down on me, creeping into my dreams. The following days blurred into one another. I began to notice other children acting strangely, whispers of anxiety rippling through the bus. I questioned Tommy, hoping he could shed some light on the situation, but he was still too frightened to speak about it. One evening, as I prepared for my shift, I received a call from Mrs. Hastings. We need to talk, it's urgent. When I arrived at the depot, I found her waiting, her expression grim. We have a serious problem, and it involves Tommy. What do you mean? I asked, anxiety coursing through me. The whispers, they've grown stronger. I received reports from other drivers about children behaving erratically, like they're being pulled toward something. My stomach twisted. Is it happening to Tommy? Yes, I believe he may be the key to whatever is happening. The whispers seemed to center around him. I could feel the tension rising as I recalled the days leading up to this moment. Don't let the last child off alone. We need to find a way to protect him, I said, determination surging within me. But how? Mrs. Hastings pulled out a weathered book, its pages yellowed with age. This contains information about the playground and its dark past. We need to understand what we're dealing with. As I flipped through the pages, I uncovered stories of children who had gone missing over the years, all linked to the playground. Each account mentioned whispers luring children away, the spirits of those who never returned. We have to confront this, I said, my resolve hardening. We need to get Tommy and take him back to the park. We need to end this. Mrs. Hastings looked hesitant. It's dangerous, but if you believe it's the only way. It is, I insisted. We can't let him fall victim to this any longer. The following day, I approached Tommy with a plan. We need to go to the playground together, I said firmly. He shook his head, fear washing over his features. I can't, they'll take me. We need to confront them, I urged, determination flooding my veins. I won't let them take you, I promise. That afternoon, I picked him up from school, his expression a mix of fear and determination. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sure, I replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Just stick close to me, we'll figure this out together. As we approached the playground, I felt a chill creeping in, the air growing thick with an oppressive energy. The shadows loomed longer, the whispers creeping back into my mind. Do you hear them? Tommy asked, his voice trembling. Yes, I admitted, feeling the weight of dread settle over me, but we can't let them win. The moment we stepped out of the bus, the atmosphere shifted. The playground lay eerily quiet, the swings swaying gently as if welcoming us. Tommy, stay close, I commanded, scanning the area for any signs of danger. He nodded, his little hand clutching mine as we walked deeper into the park. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, beckoning us to join their ethereal game. Tommy, a voice called from the shadows, laced with a haunting familiarity. Stay away, I shouted, pulling Tommy closer. We're not here to play. But the voice only grew louder, echoing in my mind, urging me to let go. Suddenly, a shape emerged from the mist. A child, smiling wide, arms outstretched. Come play with us, Tommy. We've missed you. Tommy's eyes widened with fear, his grip on my hand tightening. Don't listen to them, I yelled. We have to go. But the whispers grew deafening, wrapping around us like a vice. I could feel Tommy slipping away, the energy pulling him toward the other child. No, I screamed, trying to pull him back, but it felt like trying to hold on to smoke. The shadows shifted, and for a moment, I felt the weight of despair crushing down on me. In a moment of clarity, I recalled the rules, the warnings etched into my mind. "We have to fight back," I shouted, my voice breaking through the chaos. "Tommy, focus on me, don't listen to them." As I spoke, the whispers faltered, their grip loosening. Tommy looked at me, confusion and fear in his eyes. "I don't want to go." "Then don't," I urged, pulling him closer. "We're leaving." With renewed determination, I started moving away from the shadows, dragging Tommy with me. The whispers rose in pitch, turning frantic as we retreated. Just as we reached the bus, I felt a cold hand grasp my arm, pulling me back into the darkness. I struggled against the pull, desperate to break free. "Tommy, get in the bus," I shouted, urgency lacing my voice. He hesitated, fear etched on his face, but the moment he stepped inside, I felt a surge of power. I yanked my arm free and sprinted toward the door, diving inside just as the shadows clawed at my heels. "Go, go," I yelled, fumbling for the keys. The bus roared to life, the engine rumbling like a beast awakened from slumber. I slammed the door shut and pressed the accelerator, speeding away from the playground. The shadows chased us, but as the distance grew, the whispers faded to a distant murmur, finally silenced by the roar of the engine. Tommy sat in silence beside me, tears streaming down his face. "Are we safe?" he asked, voice trembling. "For now," I replied, my heart still racing, "but we need to stay vigilant. They won't give up easily." In the following weeks, I continued driving the bus, but the whispers lingered in my mind. Tommy seemed to improve, gradually regaining his light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't entirely gone. One day, as I picked him up from school, I noticed a change in the atmosphere. A thick fog rolled in, enveloping the streets as we drove home. The whispers returned, soft at first, but quickly growing louder. "Tommy, do you hear that?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. He nodded, fear flooding his expression. "They're back." "Stay close to me," I urged, my heart racing as I fought against the urge to panic. "We'll get through this together." But as we drove, the shadows thickened around us. I could feel the weight of their presence pressing against the bus, whispering in my ear, urging me to stop. "Keep going," I yelled, but the darkness coiled around us, growing more oppressive by the moment. Suddenly, the bus lurched, as if something had slammed against it. I fought for control, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "Tommy," I shouted, panic rising as I glanced in the rearview mirror. Shadows danced behind us, swirling like a tempest. "No, don't look," he screamed. I slammed my eyes shut, focusing on the road ahead. "Just breathe, we'll make it." With every ounce of strength, I pressed on, determined to outrun the darkness. The whispers grew frantic, urging me to turn back, to let go. But I refused. We were stronger together, bound by our shared experience, and I wouldn't let them take him. Part 12, The Resolution. Finally, I spotted the school in the distance, its lights shining like a beacon in the night. I pressed the accelerator, the bus roaring to life as we raced towards safety. As we reached the parking lot, I felt the shadows dissipate, the whispers fading into silence. We had escaped for now. I turned to Tommy, who looked shaken but relieved. "Are we safe?" he asked, his voice trembling. "For now," I replied, but uncertainty loomed in my mind. The darkness would return. I could feel it in my bones. As the weeks turned into months, I kept my promise to protect Tommy. The whispers continued to haunt me, lurking just beyond the edges of my consciousness. But together, we forged a bond, one that transcended the fear and darkness surrounding us. Every day, I drove the bus, ensuring the safety of every child who climbed aboard. I remained vigilant, watching the shadows, listening for whispers, and keeping the rules close to my heart. But deep down, I knew the truth. The darkness would always linger, waiting for a moment of weakness, for a chance to reclaim what it had lost. And I would be ready.